So, Michael, welcome to the Rishikesh campus, and it's very interesting. When we look at the work that the International Center for Contemporary Consciousness is doing, we always look at various modalities of the modern science and the I would say the larger study of consciousness getting together and working. Specifically, when we work with leaders around this whole notion of achieving success and achieving even higher levels of effectiveness, I think the work that you have done is absolutely cutting edge. In fact, in my own work, I have never seen such comprehensive body of work. The thing that you call body presence transformation. We talk about the mind-body connection. We talk about being present. We talk about the present moment consciousness. But what really intrigues me is the fact that you have encapsulated everything into one holistic framework, if I may use that term. And personally, the coaching that you did for me and the way I have used it, I've found it tremendously beneficial. I think absolutely comprehensive is the word. So why don't we talk a bit more about it and look at it, because one of the things for the viewers of this video is especially to know about your background. So Michael started as a dancer, right? If I'm not wrong, you started as a dancer.
I'm a classically trained professional dancer, which is probably one of the most important aspects of my training in this field.
Talk to us more about this. How did you get into this? Because dance is very, very different, and working around consciousness is so different. Yet you bring both together. So tell us a bit about your journey.
I think you've had the two key words there, Shakun. One is the field of consciousness, and one for me is the field of movement, or really embodiment. I've been doing meditation for 44 years. Long, regular meditation is the foundation of me, of my understanding the deeper level of life, where life comes from in the first place, where our energy, where our consciousness, where our being comes from. People who are very developed in the field of consciousness sometimes don't remember that it's very important to be embodied. We live in this body, in this world. You can have high spirituality, but unless you're living it on a day-to-day basis, in all your interactions, with your social interactions, with your family, with your loved ones, with your work, you're staying up in the clouds and you're not living on earth. So one of my missions, I would say, is to bring really heaven onto earth in our bodies right here, right now.
That's absolutely an amazing concept. We talk about looking for bliss in achievement, but here you are talking about bringing heaven to earth. Tell us more about it. When you talk about body presence, what does it entail? What is this concept all about?
There's really a deep undercurrent we find in our lives. I'll give it a practical example. We set a goal for ourselves. We want to become more financially independent. That would be a good example. And yet, even though we feel very organized, we're very clear on our mission, very clear on our goal, we move closer and closer to the goal, and yet we find that when we get closer to that, there's some ways that perhaps we sabotage it, perhaps that we divert it with procrastination. And then we find consistently that there's some impulse inside of ourselves, maybe that comes from our unconscious or subconscious, that is taking us on a different track. What I find is that there's a lack of alignment between our big vision and sometimes what's really happening in our gut or in our heart. That's the domain of body presence. In body presence, you're looking at really, what I looked at to was what's happening with our awareness. That's very clear. The next is what's happening in your heart. The next is what's happening in your gut. We really have three brains. Our brain up in our head, which is what most of the world talks about. That's all we care about is intelligence. But we also have an emotional intelligence. That could be called our EQ. We have our IQ, our EQ, which is our emotional intelligence. And one thing that's not covered at all is this field of body intelligence, which I would call BQ. And the body intelligence is so important. That's our gut level feelings, our gut level hunches. Every entrepreneur knows those are the people that are really successful, that not only have an open heart, but have a gut level hunch. And that's really how consciousness comes into our bodies through our intelligence, our awareness, our feelings, our emotions, and also our gut level instinctive. Instinctive is so key because that's really where we come from. That's the framework of body intelligence, body presence.
So it's fascinating that you talk about the alignment of the intellect, the emotional intelligence, and the gut. In my own personal life, it's very interesting because I've been an entrepreneur and I've been the head of the organization as well. When I have taken decisions, big decisions, both pertaining to my life and career or pertaining to the businesses that I have run, I have realized often that there is a misalignment between what my intellect is telling, what my gut feels, and what physically I end up doing, at a physical level.
Really good point, Shakun. This is a perfect example. Now, there's many ways you can apply body presence or this field of body-centered transformation. You can use it to work with, one of my specialties is in the area of psychosomatic issues that come up. Like I've worked with a client, for example, who really high-powered, very creative person who had this pattern of migraine headaches. I work to try to find those subtle, slightly psychosomatic, which is the relationship between the mind and the body, that lies as the base of these quirky symptoms. And sometimes those quirky symptoms can actually not just be a problem to be gotten rid of, but they become an aperture, an opening through which a whole new level of our soul unfolds. So it can be used on a clinical level, but more likely when I work with people, I'm working in the area which you just described. High achievers who want to take it to the level of super peak performance. And what you've said, because I think you're very successful in what you do, you've been working on this area where sometimes you feel there's a disalignment, a lack of alignment between the gut level hunch that you're getting, your intellect, which maybe overrules it. You listen, your head says do this, but you have a nagging feeling that something's not quite right. And then you end up getting a little confused because you don't know which way to go, and the action doesn't come out as clear. That's a perfect example of how this can be applied. One of the most foundational levels is to get people aware that they can't just rely on their thinking mind to get them to their goal. Yeah. They have to tune into their feelings, and sometimes that takes a little work to actually be tuned into those more subtle emotional feelings of where the heart wants to go and where the heart doesn't want to go. Sometimes it's a matter of listening. It's not only a matter of being able to listen to your body signals, which is a skill that most people lack. Not only listen to your body signals, but then actually do something. Yeah.
So this is a very interesting thing that you talked about. We talk about this workaholism in high achievers, and that's exactly where people tend to miss on the signals of the body. Talk to me more about what it actually does. How does it work? How does this concept feel?
And I want to go back to your question too. When you start tuning in and listening to your body signals, that's the whole foundation of anything. You have to listen to yourself. And listening to yourself has three values: what your intellect thinks about, what you really feel, and there's this gut level feeling. They're finding we really do have these three brains, and this gut level brain, our more primitive instinctual brain, has more nerve endings, or almost as many nerve endings as our brain itself. We do have three levels of consciousness. So the first step is listening to these body signals, tuning in so you really listen. Then the key is converging them. Can you imagine the power you feel when, and I'm sure you've had a few times in your life, when your mind was super clear, your heart was completely supporting it, and your gut level power was driving it. Those are peak experiences. When you do that, you're invincible. Everything you do works. You just are like in the zone. That's my definition of being in the zone, is when the head, heart, and gut align into one juggernaut of power.
Yeah,
that's success.
And I think that's the key to unleashing the potential. The problem today is not about doing it once, but it's about replicating the success over and over again.
Right.
And it's the whole point to my mind is that do we get into that zone of alignment by choice or by luck, right?
Perfect
and if I
point.
could do that on choice, I think I would be the luckiest person on this earth.
Exactly. I mean, there's a famous quote by Louis Pasteur, who founded the whole field of microbiology. He says, "Chance favors only the prepared mind." Yeah. I will add to that, chance favors the prepared mind, heart, and gut.
Yeah.
And really what I've spent my whole life, I'm fascinated by this concept of being in the zone. And like you said, you don't want to do it just with serendipity. How can you really choose to be in the zone? How can you align all your energies to be in the zone? And the key, I feel I found this formula. I went deep inside when I was doing my graduate work. I took my background as a dancer, my background as a body worker. Where I really, as a dancer, I wanted to know how the body works, how the mechanics put together. And then I got a master's degree in Vedic psychology. I wove those three together to come up with this field of body presence. You asked where the spark came from earlier. And I think I had a cognition, a deep insight of how consciousness comes into our body through these three primary centers of awareness, breath, and the emotions, and the gut. And as I worked and developed this, I saw how I could train people to work with all three. I could see how they could become superpowered moving towards success. I could also see how these unconscious desires and urges sabotage or block their growth towards success. So I can work on a remedial level of transforming the blocks and also supercharging this integration.
So Michael, this is interesting. I know in your work as a producer, you work with a lot of high achievers who also have high levels of stress, pressure, achievement motivation, and so on and so forth, which even a lot of people in other professions relate to. How do you think this whole science of body presence is relevant in personal life as well as professional life, specifically for people who are right up there in the zone of high achievement?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I have two parallel careers. One is in this field as a therapist or a facilitator in this field of body presence, but I also have a parallel track as a producer. And I've had the joy of working with some of the top people in the field, from Paul McCartney and Ringo and Sheryl Crow, Donovan, some of the top performers in the world. Jim Carrey, I produced his commencement address that's gone totally viral.
Oh yeah, that's gone totally viral.
Yeah. And it's great working with these people who have made living in the zone a way of life. And when I watch them in action, and of course I've worked with David Lynch as well, when I watch them in action, it's like there's a superfluidity that goes with them. There's an integration. So I've tried to make a science of where integration comes from. And that's why I keep bringing back to this whole thing of having this integration between our head, heart, and gut. Now, on a personal level, basically happiness, fulfillment, and especially health, invariably when your health falls off, it basically happens because you haven't been listening to yourself. And the way you listen to yourself, I find, is listening to these body signals. That feeling of, no, that's not quite right. No, that feels really good. No, I'm pushing myself too hard. I should back off a little bit. That kind of listening to body signals listening to your signals takes some skill. I work with training people on those basic skills. But then you can take it to the next level when you can start to really see how you can, as I talked about that convergence, my definition of being in the zone is when your head, heart, and gut converge. That may sound simple, but how often does that really happen? So I've developed an approach where I can increase the likelihood of that happening more often. And when you're in the zone, you get super results.
In fact, as a consultant, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people, today in the world talking about startups, a lot of high achievers as well. So what are some of the quick tips that you would have for all of us to start embarking on this journey before we kind of get deeper into understanding of this?
So you're going to have me be practical right on the spot. Well, let's go back to one of the issues that you told me about. You said, let's make it personal to you. You said sometimes you feel that there's a lack of alignment between your head and your gut level feelings, and then the action doesn't come out right. One of the kind of the insights that I found, which happens to almost everyone, is that usually whenever things aren't working quite right in our life, it's because we have two opposing values. Meaning your head is saying something, I feel that I need to do this because I have set certain goals for myself and I need to achieve those goals. While your gut is saying something like, I don't think that's the right direction. I think that's a wrong track that I should go on in my life. And you try to suppress or overrule that gut level feeling. So those are two opposite values, and almost all problems in our life, I found, is because we have two opposite values that we're either trying to go one way or the other. What we really need to do is transcend to a deeper level of synthesis that somehow embraces both. That takes a little attention even to find the opposite values and then put them together. So you find my gut is saying, I really need to shift my career in a slightly different direction, and the other is I need to support my family. I need to stay on what I know to be safe and more comfortable. Something is brewing. When the minute you have an opposite value, you got to go somewhere deep. So some new element. That's where the real creativity comes from, to find, I can find a way to somehow fulfill my responsibilities towards my family and also serve this higher purpose. And just being aware of those helps you make that shift.
No, I think as you speak about having these opposite values, a lot of times when we become risk averse or sometimes we do not chase our dreams, I think this is a very strong understanding of this,
It's a perfect example of of a classic oppositional value between playing it safe and achieving our dreams. But there's many kinds of opposite values that come up, and they're usually a battle on some level between your head and your gut.
And fact of the matter is that I'm personally very glad as well as grateful that now you have chosen to work more with us here in India specifically, because I think the energy and the potential that we have here in the eastern side of the world is phenomenal. And with our understanding of our culture, our tradition, a little bit of Vedic sciences, this is just the right for us time for us to be welcoming you. So thank you for your time here. Thanks for visiting our beautiful campus here. And
it's fantastic being on the shores of the Ganges here. As I came here just to visit you, just to feel this deep level of serenity, peace, and eternal quality is a fantastic foundation to really merge together this field of consciousness and the body so people can really achieve their dreams.
Thank you so much, Michael. This was such a wonderful evening spent with you and this wonderful conversation. We'll be together and we hope more from you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Shakun.